Some futures arrive loudly. Others dissolve on the tongue before you know what they are. This story is about a woman who doesn't see what's coming. She tastes it. The first time Lina Serrano tasted tomorrow, she thought the milk had gone bad. It was early, still dark, the kitchen quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator, and the distant sound of traffic beginning to organize itself into morning. Lina poured the milk carefully, as she always did, watching the level rise just below the rim of the glass. She took a sip and froze. Metallic, sharp, wrong. She checked the date. Fresh. She smelled it. Fine. She took another sip, slower this time, letting it coat her tongue. The taste intensified. Copper, ozone, something like rain hitting hot pavement. Lina set the glass down, heart thudding, suddenly certain of something she could not have articulated if asked. Not fear, not certainty, expectation. An hour later, as she stood on the train platform, a transformer blew 2 blocks away, showering sparks across the street and cutting power to half the line. The air filled with the exact same taste. Lina didn't scream. She swallowed. Lina was a food chemist by training, which meant she trusted her senses only after she had disproven them thoroughly. That morning, she logged the experience the way she logged everything unusual: time, conditions, possible contaminants. She brushed her teeth again. She rinsed her mouth with water. The taste lingered faintly, like a memory refusing to fade. At work, she tested everything she consumed: coffee, protein bar, tap water. Each tasted exactly as expected, reassuringly dull. Relief settled in. Then, at 11:42 a.m., a colleague dropped a tray of glassware, the shatter echoing through the lab like a gunshot. The sharp scent of solvent filled the air. And there it was again. Copper, ozone, rain. Lina closed her eyes. 5 minutes later, the fire alarm went off. By the third incident, Lina stopped pretending it was coincidence. She began carrying a notebook everywhere, documenting flavors with the kind of obsessive care usually reserved for symptoms. Bitter preceded arguments. Acidic preceded accidents. Sweet, unsettlingly sweet, came before moments of quiet devastation. Layoffs, breakups, phone calls that began with silence. She did not tell anyone, partly because she had no language for it, mostly because the tasting itself felt private, intimate, in a way that resisted explanation. The future did not announce itself. It brushed against her senses, subtle and fleeting, as if unsure she was meant to notice. The problem was duration. At first, the tastes appeared seconds before events, then minutes, then hours. One night, brushing her teeth before bed, Lina tasted smoke. She didn't sleep. Mateo Ruiz entered her life tasting like citrus. Not sharp, not sour, just bright, clean, unexpected. They met at a pop-up food market she visited on impulse, drawn by the absence of any particular flavor in the air. He was running a small stall selling empanadas, his movements easy, practiced, his laughter unguarded. Lina ordered one without thinking and bit into it. Warm, savory, normal. She almost cried. They talked while she ate, about nothing that mattered and everything that did. By the time she left, her notebook remained untouched, forgotten in her bag. That night, brushing her teeth, Lina tasted citrus again. She smiled. Then, beneath it, faint but unmistakable, came copper. Lina did not panic. That surprised her more than the sensation itself. Panic had always been her reflex when confronted with things that refused explanation. But this felt different. This felt like a system that could be learned, even if it could not be controlled. She began with restraint. When a taste appeared, she did not act immediately. She waited. She watched. She allowed the event to occur as it would have without interference. The notebook filled quickly, pages dense with dates and descriptors written in the careful shorthand of someone afraid that too much clarity might break the phenomenon entirely. Smoke meant fire, but not always flames. Sometimes it was an overheated motor, sometimes a burned-out fuse. Bitter did not always mean conflict. Once, it meant disappointment delivered politely. The flavors were not moral. They were informational. That realization grounded her. What unsettled her was the way the window widened. The future no longer brushed her tongue briefly. It lingered. Some mornings she woke already tasting something that did not belong to the day yet. The flavor dulling only after the event had passed, as if the future itself required digestion. She stopped eating breakfast. The first time Lina tried to intervene, it was accidental. She tasted rot while riding the bus home, an unmistakable, heavy flavor that sat at the back of her mouth and refused to move. Panic flickered then, sharp and immediate. Rot had preceded illness once. Death, another time. She got off the bus early. The man who would have collapsed 2 stops later never boarded. Lina stood on the sidewalk, heart racing, mouth dry, watching the bus pull away. The taste faded slowly, reluctantly, like something disappointed. She did not feel relief. She felt watched. That night, the citrus returned, bright and clean, but thinner than before. Mateo texted her a photo of a new recipe he was testing, something with lime and chili, asking her opinion. She typed a response, erased it, typed again. Before she could hit send, she tasted copper. She dropped the phone. Lina told Mateo a version of the truth. Not about the future, not about the tasting. She told him she had anxiety. That sudden sensory overload sometimes made her distant. He listened without interrupting, nodding slowly, his expression open but not probing. "Tell me what helps," he said. The simplicity of it made her throat tighten. For a while, things stabilized. The tastes did not disappear, but they softened when Mateo was near, as if the future itself hesitated around him. Citrus dominated, warmth, familiarity. Then one afternoon, sitting across from him in a cafe, Lina tasted ash. She looked up at him sharply. He was smiling. Nothing happened. Not that day. Not the next. The ash lingered anyway, clinging to everything she ate, everything she drank. It dulled flavors, flattened them, made even citrus taste tired. She realized then that some events were not singular. Some were processes. The lab noticed her decline before she did. Her supervisor called her in gently. concern wrapped in bureaucratic language. Lina listened, nodding, tasting sweetness edged with bitterness the entire time. The meeting ended with suggestions rather than threats, accommodations instead of ultimatums. Sweet meant loss without anger. That night, Lina sat alone in her kitchen, notebook open, pen idle. She tasted smoke again, strong enough to make her eyes water. She traced the pattern back, page by page, mapping flavor to outcome, outcome to decision. Intervention did not erase events. It displaced them. Avoiding one future made room for another, the taste shifting but never disappearing entirely. The future was not a line. It was a field, and she was standing in it, altering its chemistry with every step. Her phone buzzed. Mateo. She tasted copper before she read the message. Lina did not tell Mateo everything. She told him enough. They sat on the floor of her apartment, backs against the couch, the city humming faintly through the windows. She chose her words carefully, the way she always did now, aware that language itself felt fragile under the weight of what she was trying to describe. "I get warnings," she said. "Not thoughts. Sensations. Before things happen." Mateo did not laugh. He did not interrupt. He waited, which somehow felt like the most dangerous response of all. "What kind of things?" he asked. "Accidents. Loss. Changes that don't ask permission." She hesitated. "Not always bad. Just irreversible." He nodded slowly. "And me?" Lina tasted citrus immediately, sharp and bright, so sudden it almost hurt. Beneath it, faint but present, the familiar copper hum. "Yes," she said. Mateo exhaled, leaning his head back against the couch. "Okay," he said after a moment. "Then we do this carefully." The word carefully echoed in her mouth like something she might choke on later. The problem with telling someone is that the future notices. Lina realized this within days. The taste grew more complex, layered in ways they never had before. Citrus mixed with ash, sweetness edged with smoke. The sensations arrived earlier, lingered longer, as if the timeline itself were stretching under the added weight of awareness. Mateo began asking questions Lina could not answer. "Can you stop things? Can you choose which ones matter? What happens if you ignore it?" She didn't know. Once, walking together through a crowded intersection, Lina tasted rot so suddenly she stumbled. She grabbed Mateo's arm, pulling him back hard enough to draw a sharp protest. A delivery truck ran the red light seconds later. Mateo stared after it, pale and shaken. When he looked back at her, something had changed in his eyes. Not fear, reliance. That night, Lina couldn't eat. Every bite tasted like obligation. Preventing futures felt heavier than enduring them. Lina learned this the hard way. Each intervention seemed to thicken the air around her, dulling her senses, blurring the boundaries between now and next. The tastes became less precise, muddier, as if the future resented being handled too often. Mateo tried to help in the ways he knew how. He cooked for her, adjusting flavors instinctively, grounding her in the present. He made jokes. He planned small things that felt safe. Movies, walks, dinners with friends. But Lina began tasting bitterness during those plans. Bitterness meant strain. She started canceling. Mateo didn't argue. He adapted, which only made the bitterness worse. The first time Lina tasted absence, she didn't recognize it. It wasn't sharp or metallic or sweet. It was flat, hollow, like water left too long in an open glass. She noticed it one morning while brushing her teeth, standing barefoot on cold tile, staring at her own reflection. She set the toothbrush down slowly. Absence meant departure. Not necessarily death. Not catastrophe. Just removal. She thought of Mateo immediately. Her phone buzzed as if summoned. She didn't answer it. They fought quietly. That was how Lina knew it mattered. Mateo didn't accuse her of anything. He didn't demand explanation she couldn't give. He asked instead what she needed, what she was afraid of, how much of this future-tasting life she planned to share with him. "I don't know where I end anymore," Lina said finally. "Everything I do changes what comes next." Mateo's voice was steady. "So does everything everyone does." She tasted ash. "Not like this," she said. The argument ended without resolution. The air between them heavy with things that hadn't happened yet, but were already being mourned. That night, Lina dreamed without taste for the first time in months. She woke up crying. Lina discovered the narrowing slowly, the way one notices a room growing smaller only after bumping into the walls. It began with omission. She stopped tasting certain things altogether. The sharp metallic edge that had once warned her of sudden violence faded first, followed by the bitter notes that signaled conflict. At first she felt relief, a lightness she hadn't realized she was missing. Eating became easier. Mornings arrived without dread coating her tongue. Then the sweetness went. Not all at once, but unevenly, thinning like a memory you're no longer sure belongs to you. Citrus dulled. Warmth flattened. Mateo's presence still calmed her, but it no longer arrived with clarity. She could sit beside him and feel nothing predictive at all, which frightened her more than copper ever had. The future was receding. Not because it had forgiven her, but because she had stopped meeting it halfway. She realized, with a shock that left her dizzy, that the tasting had never been a gift without cost. It was a channel, and like any channel, it could be closed by narrowing what passed through it. The price was obvious. So was the appeal. The next time Lina tasted smoke, she did nothing. She was alone in her apartment, standing at the stove, water heating for pasta. The flavor rose suddenly, thick and unmistakable, filling her mouth with urgency. Her body reacted before her mind could, muscles tensing, breath catching. She stayed where she was. The smoke taste intensified, sharp enough to burn, and then faded, leaving behind only the ordinary scent of boiling water. Lina stood there shaking, waiting for the crash, the alarm, the consequence. Nothing happened. An hour later, a news alert mentioned a warehouse fire across the city. No injuries. Contained quickly. Lina sat down on the kitchen floor and laughed, the sound breaking into something like a sob halfway through. She had let it pass, and the world had not ended. Lina pulled away from Mateo deliberately. Not abruptly. Not cruelly. She framed it as work stress, exhaustion, the kind of slow withdrawal that could be mistaken for circumstance rather than choice. Mateo sensed it anyway. He always had. "You're deciding something without me," he said one evening, standing in her doorway, hands in his pockets. She tasted absence again, stronger now. "I'm trying to keep you safe," she said. Mateo shook his head. "From what?" "From being a variable," Lina replied. The words tasted bitter as soon as she said them. He didn't argue. He nodded once, as if accepting terms he didn't like but understood. That quiet acceptance hurt more than anger would have. After he left, Lina noticed that the tasting receded further, as if satisfied. Weeks passed. Lina's notebook remained mostly blank. Meals tasted normal. Days unfolded without warning. The future, once loud and insistent, became a distant murmur she could ignore if she chose. Her life grew smaller, safer. She kept her job. She paid her bills. She slept through the night. But something inside her felt dulled, as if the world had lost dimension, flattening into a sequence of manageable presence. Sometimes, brushing her teeth before bed, she strained for any hint of flavor that didn't belong to now. There was nothing. She told herself this was peace. The sweetness returned unexpectedly. Lina was walking home late, the streets quiet, the city settled into its after-hours rhythm, when a familiar warmth bloomed on her tongue. Citrus, clean and bright, layered with something softer beneath it. She stopped short. Sweetness meant hope. She hadn't tasted hope in months. Her phone vibrated in her pocket. Mateo's name lit the screen. Beneath the sweetness, faint but undeniable, came copper. Lina closed her eyes. The future, it seemed, was not done negotiating. Lina answered the phone without speaking. She didn't need to. Mateo knew. He always had, in the way that mattered, in the way that didn't require explanation. His breathing came through the line first, steady but tight, like he was standing very still. "I'm not in trouble," he said. "I just needed to hear your voice." The sweetness on Lina's tongue deepened, layered now with warmth and something like relief. The copper remained, distant but present, a low hum beneath everything else. "I've been trying not to interfere," Lina said quietly. "I thought if I stopped tasting, things would normalize." Mateo was silent for a moment. "Did they?" "Yes," Lina said. Then, after a pause, "No." She realized then that the future had not punished her for withdrawing. It had waited. The tastes had receded, not because she had closed the door, but because she had stopped opening it. Now, with this call, the door had shifted again, just enough to let sensation through. "I don't want to be a variable," Mateo said. Lina swallowed. "You already are." They met the next day in the park, near Lina's apartment. Sitting on a bench, worn smooth by years of other conversations. Lina tasted nothing at first, which almost unnerved her, more than warning would have. The air was neutral, the moment unclaimed. So she spoke. She told Mateo everything she had held back. The flavors, the widening windows, the way intervention displaced rather than erased outcomes, the narrowing she had chosen, and what it had cost her. She did not soften it. She did not frame it as protection. She framed it as fact. Mateo listened without interrupting, his hands folded loosely in his lap. When she finished, he exhaled slowly. "So you don't see the future," he said. "You feel possible ones." Lina nodded. "And the more I act, the more they multiply." He considered this. "Then maybe the problem isn't that you taste tomorrow," he said. "Maybe it's that you think you're supposed to fix it." The words settled into her with a clarity that tasted, unexpectedly, like clean water. The next taste came that evening. Ash. It rose suddenly as Lina stood at her kitchen counter, Mateo beside her, chopping vegetables with deliberate care. The flavor was unmistakable, heavy and lingering. Lina's body tensed automatically. Mateo noticed. "What is it?" She hesitated. This was the moment she had been avoiding for months, the fulcrum where honesty became action. "A fire," she said. "Not here, somewhere close. I don't know when." Mateo wiped his hands on a towel. "What do you want to do?" The question startled her. "Not what should we do? What do you want?" Lina closed her eyes and listened to the taste instead of fighting it. The ash wasn't sharp. It wasn't urgent. It felt distant. "I think," she said slowly, "that it's going to happen whether I run from it or not." Mateo nodded. "Then we stay." They finished cooking. The fire broke out later that night in a building several blocks away. No one was hurt. The damage was contained. Lina tasted ash until morning, and then it faded. She had not intervened. And the future had still been survivable. The tasting did not return to its former intensity. It settled into something quieter, more selective. Lina no longer tasted everything, only things that intersected closely with her own life, her own choices. The future did not shout anymore. It whispered. She stopped keeping the notebook, not because she didn't care, but because she no longer needed to prove anything to herself. The tasting wasn't a responsibility. It was a condition, like sensitivity or memory, something to be lived with rather than solved. Mateo remained a variable, but now he was a chosen one. They argued sometimes. They made plans knowing Lina might taste bitterness or sweetness around them. They learned to sit with uncertainty instead of trying to eliminate it. Love, Lina realized, had always been a prediction problem. She had just been tasting it out loud. Months later, Lina woke one morning tasting citrus so vivid it made her laugh. She lay there for a moment, breathing, letting the flavor exist without demanding explanation. There was no copper beneath it, no ash, no bitterness waiting to assert itself. Just brightness. She got up, poured herself a glass of milk, and drank it without fear. The future did not disappear. It remained exactly where it belonged, ahead of her. The future did not stop speaking to Lina. It learned how to be quieter. She never lost the taste entirely. She learned when to listen and when to let the flavor pass without interpretation, to accept that knowing was not the same as controlling. The future was not a responsibility to be managed. It was a presence to be lived beside. Lina did not choose ignorance. She chose proportion. Love remained a variable. Risk remained unavoidable. But tomorrow no longer demanded to be solved before it arrived. It was allowed to unfold with its edges intact, sharp or sweet as it needed to be. Some futures dissolve on the tongue, others stay. And Lina learned the difference between swallowing fear and savoring hope.